It was just another Tuesday afternoon at the Westfield Mall. The sun streamed through the skylights, casting warm patches of light across the polished floors. Amara Johnson pushed her shopping cart down the aisle of the department store, pausing now and then to check items against the list she'd made on her phone. Her nephew's birthday was this weekend, and she wanted to make it special. Amara had the day off from her job as county sheriff. After 12 years in law enforcement, she had worked her way up through the ranks with determination and grit. 6 months ago, she had made history as the first black woman to be elected sheriff in the county. Today, though, she wasn't thinking about work or making history. She was just an aunt trying to find the perfect gift for her 11-year-old nephew, who was obsessed with space and science. The telescope should be in the next aisle, she muttered to herself, glancing at the store map on her phone. She was dressed casually in jeans and a light blue button-up shirt, her badge and gun locked safely at home. The only hint of her profession was the thin blue line bracelet her team had given her last Christmas, which she wore alongside her watch. As she turned the corner into the electronics section, Amara spotted a display of telescopes. Perfect. She began examining the different models, comparing features and prices. She picked up one of the boxes, reading the specifications carefully when she felt someone standing uncomfortably close behind her. "Excuse me," came a stern male voice. Amara turned around to find a white police officer staring at her with narrowed eyes. He was about her age, with a crew cut and a rigid posture that suggested he took himself very seriously. His name tag read Officer Reynolds. He didn't smile or introduce himself properly. "Can I help you?" Amara asked politely, wondering if perhaps he recognized her from some law enforcement function. "I need you to come with me," Officer Reynolds said loudly, causing several nearby shoppers to look over. "We've had reports of shoplifting in this area." Amara blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, what? I haven't taken anything." She gestured to her half-filled shopping cart. "I'm just looking at telescopes for my nephew." Officer Reynolds crossed his arms. "Ma'am, we have security footage of someone matching your description putting items in their bag." His eyes flicked pointedly to the small purse hanging from Amara's shoulder. Cold feeling washed over Amara as she realized what was happening. She'd been through this before, though not since becoming sheriff. Being accused of things she hadn't done was sadly familiar territory. "Officer, I haven't stolen anything. I have receipts for the items I've already purchased." She reached slowly toward her purse, but Officer Reynolds stepped forward. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he said sharply. "I need to look in that bag." People were definitely staring now. An older woman with a shopping cart full of housewares slowed to watch. A teenage boy pretended to look at video games while sneaking glances at the unfolding scene. "Officer Reynolds," Amara said calmly, keeping her voice low and steady despite her rising anger, "I understand you're doing your job, but there's been a mistake. I haven't taken anything from this store." "Then you won't mind showing me what's in your bag," he countered, holding out his hand expectantly. Amara took a deep breath. She knew her rights and she knew she had done nothing wrong. But she also knew how quickly these situations could escalate. As a law enforcement officer herself, she understood the importance of staying calm. "Before I do that, may I ask what specific item I'm suspected of taking, and whether you have actually seen me take something on this security footage you mentioned?" Officer Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Look, lady, I don't have time for games. Either show me what's in the bag or we can continue this conversation down at the station." A young woman nearby had taken out her phone and appeared to be recording the interaction. Amara noticed this from the corner of her eye but kept her focus on the officer in front of her. "I'm asking you simple, reasonable questions," Amara said, her voice firm but not confrontational. "I'd like to know what prompted this accusation." Officer Reynolds stepped closer, lowering his voice but somehow making it more threatening. "I've seen people like you in here before. Always the same story." The words hit Amara like a physical blow. "People like you." There it was, the real reason she was being stopped. Not because of any security footage, not because of any actual suspicion of theft, but because of the color of her skin. For a moment, Amara considered revealing her identity right then. It would be so satisfying to see the look on this man's face when he realized he was harassing the county sheriff. But professional integrity won out. If she was going to address this situation, she would do it properly, through the right channels. "Officer Reynolds," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I'm going to comply with your request to check my bag. But I want it noted that I'm doing so under protest." and that you have not provided any legitimate reason for suspecting me of theft. A store employee, a young man with an apologetic expression, had wandered over, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Is everything okay here?" he asked hesitantly. "Store security issue," Officer Reynolds said curtly, not taking his eyes off Amara. "Just doing my job." "There is no security issue," Amara countered, looking directly at the employee. "I've been accused of shoplifting with no evidence or reasonable suspicion." The employee shifted nervously from foot to foot. I don't think our security team called the police today." Officer Reynolds ignored this comment. "The bag, ma'am, now." More people had gathered, keeping a cautious distance but watching intently. Amara could feel the tension building, could see the way some people already assumed she was guilty, while others seemed concerned about how she was being treated. Slowly, Amara unzipped her purse. "I'm going to show you the contents of my bag," she said clearly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "Because I have nothing to hide, but I want witnesses to see that I'm being singled out and treated disrespectfully without cause." As she began to open her bag, a store manager approached, a middle-aged woman with a concerned expression. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking between Amara and Officer Reynolds. "This officer has accused me of shoplifting," Amara explained calmly. "He hasn't told me what I supposedly took or shown me any evidence." "I believe I'm being profiled," the manager frowned. "Officer, did our security team call you?" "I was doing a routine patrol through the mall when I noticed suspicious behavior," Officer Reynolds said, his confidence slightly shaken by the manager's arrival. "I'm just following up on it." "By harassing a customer who's done nothing wrong?" Amara asked. She turned to the manager. "I'd like to file a formal complaint about this treatment." Officer Reynolds' face hardened. "Empty the bag, now, or I'll detain you for obstruction." The threat hung in the air, heavy and unjust. Amara looked around at the growing crowd of onlookers. At least 3 people were recording now. Good. Let them document this abuse of power. With deliberate slowness, Amara began removing items from her purse. Her wallet, a pack of tissues, her phone charger, keys, a small bottle of hand sanitizer, lip balm. Each item she placed carefully on a nearby display shelf. "See? No stolen merchandise," she said, holding up the empty purse for inspection. "Now would you like to check my wallet too? Or perhaps you'd like to search my pockets as well." Officer Reynolds looked briefly uncomfortable, but then he pointed to her wallet. "Open that." Amara raised her eyebrows but complied. She unfolded her wallet, revealing her credit cards, some cash, and a few receipts. And there, tucked into a special slot, was her sheriff's badge, partially visible. Officer Reynolds hadn't noticed it yet. He was too busy scrutinizing the rest of her wallet's contents. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to a receipt. "That's from the bookstore next door where I bought a space encyclopedia for my nephew earlier today," Amara replied. "Would you like to see the book?" "It's in my car." The manager was looking increasingly distressed. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We haven't had any reports of shoplifting today." Officer Reynolds ignored her, still focused on Amara's wallet. "And those receipts?" "Coffee from this morning," Amara said, her patience wearing thin. "And gas from yesterday. Would you like to see them too?" As she shifted the wallet to show him, the light caught on her badge. The golden surface gleamed, the emblem of the county sheriff's department clearly visible now to anyone who was looking closely. And someone was. The store employee who had approached earlier suddenly went pale. He leaned toward the manager and whispered something in her ear. The manager's eyes widened as she looked back at Amara with dawning recognition. Officer Reynolds was still too caught up in his baseless investigation to notice the change in atmosphere. "What's that in the side pocket there?" he demanded. Amara had had enough. She pulled out her badge and ID and held them up for everyone to see. "This," she said clearly, "is my sheriff's badge and identification. I'm Sheriff Amara Johnson of this county, and you, Officer Reynolds, have just made a very serious mistake." The department store fell eerily quiet. For a moment, Officer Reynolds just stared at the badge in Amara's hand, his mouth slightly open. The shoppers who had gathered to watch the scene unfold exchanged looks of surprise and confusion. Some of them were still recording with their phones, capturing every second of the uncomfortable silence. "Is this some kind of joke?" Officer Reynolds finally said, his voice noticeably less confident than before. "Does this look like a joke to you?" Amara replied, her voice steady but with an edge of steel. She held her ID card next to the badge so he could clearly see her photo and official title. Sheriff Amara Johnson, County Sheriff's Department. The store manager stepped forward, her face a mix of horror and embarrassment. "Sheriff Johnson, I'm so sorry about this misunderstanding. We absolutely did not call for police assistance today." Officer Reynolds's face had turned a deep shade of red. He straightened his back and attempted to regain his composure. "You should have identified yourself immediately," he said stiffly. Amara slowly put her badge and ID back in her wallet, taking her time before responding. The crowd around them had grown, with at least 15 people now watching the confrontation. The soft beeping of cash registers and the store's background music seemed far away, as if the bubble of tension around them had muted everything else. "No. Officer Reynolds, I shouldn't have needed to," Amara said finally. "No citizen should have to prove they're not a criminal while shopping for their family. You approached me without cause, made accusations without evidence, and used threatening language to intimidate me." She gestured to her half-filled shopping cart. "I was simply looking at telescopes for my nephew. Nothing in my behavior warranted suspicion, so I have to wonder, what exactly made you decide I was a shoplifter?" Officer Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "I was responding to a pattern of behavior consistent with—" "A pattern of behavior?" Amara interrupted. "Please explain this pattern to everyone here." A woman in the crowd called out, "He saw a black woman shopping in an expensive department and assumed she was stealing." Several people nodded in agreement. Officer Reynolds's face hardened. "This has nothing to do with race. I'm just doing my job." "Your job is to protect and serve," Amara countered, "not to harass innocent people based on prejudice." She looked around at the watching crowd, at the phones recording the encounter. "Everyone here saw what happened. You singled me out, refused to tell me what I'd supposedly stolen, and threatened to arrest me when I asked reasonable questions." The store employee who had first recognized Amara's badge stepped forward nervously. I work in security and we definitely didn't report any shoplifting today. We haven't even had any suspicious activity on the cameras." Officer Reynolds shot the young man an angry look. "Stay out of this." "No, he shouldn't stay out of it," Amara said firmly. "He's confirming what I already knew, that you had no legitimate reason to stop me." She straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath. "Officer Reynolds, I'm going to need your badge number and the name of your supervising officer." "Now hold on," Officer Reynolds said, lowering his voice and stepping closer to Amara. "There's no need to escalate this. We had a misunderstanding, that's all." "A misunderstanding," Amara repeated, not backing down. "Is that what you call racial profiling these days?" An older gentleman in a business suit who had been watching stepped forward. "I saw the whole thing." This officer was completely out of line. "Sir, please step back," Officer Reynolds said, his hand moving to rest on his belt near his radio. "Don't tell me to step back," the man replied. "I'm a retired judge, and what I just witnessed was a clear violation of this woman's civil rights." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. More people had their phones out now, recording the escalating situation. Officer Reynolds looked increasingly uncomfortable, caught between his pride and the realization that he had made a serious mistake. The store manager tried to defuse the situation. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation in my office, away from the sales floor." "I appreciate the offer," Amara said, "but no. This happened in public and it should be addressed in public." She turned back to Officer Reynolds. "Your badge number, please." Officer Reynolds's jaw tightened. For a moment it seemed like he might refuse. Then reluctantly he recited his badge number. "Reynolds, badge number 8742. And your supervising officer?" "Lieutenant Wilson," he muttered. Amara nodded and pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call him now." "That won't be necessary," Officer Reynolds said quickly. "I can handle this." "You've already demonstrated how you handle things," Amara replied, dialing the number. "I think it's time we got your superior involved." As she waited for the call to connect, the store manager approached her again. "Sheriff Johnson, on behalf of the store, I want to apologize for this terrible experience." "You have nothing to apologize for," Amara said, covering the phone's microphone. "Your store didn't call the police. Officer Reynolds made that decision on his own." The call connected and Amara switched to speakerphone. Lieutenant Wilson, this is Sheriff Amara Johnson. I'm at the Westfield Mall department store, and I need to report an incident involving one of your officers, Officer Reynolds, badge number 8742. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sheriff Johnson? What's going on? I was shopping while off duty when Officer Reynolds approached me, accused me of shoplifting without any evidence, refused to tell me what I'd supposedly stolen, and threatened to detain me when I asked for clarification. Only after forcing me to empty my purse and wallet did he see my badge and ID. Is Officer Reynolds still there with you? Lieutenant Wilson asked, his voice serious. Yes, he is. And there are at least 20 witnesses, many of whom are recording this interaction. Officer Reynolds stared at the phone, his face a mixture of anger and fear. He clearly hadn't expected the situation to escalate to this level. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Lieutenant Wilson said firmly. Please don't leave, and ask Officer Reynolds to remain as well. We'll be here, Amara confirmed before ending the call. The tension in the air was palpable. Officer Reynolds stood rigidly, avoiding eye contact with Amara and the watching crowd. A few people had drifted away, but most remained, curious to see how the situation would resolve. Amara put her phone away and began carefully replacing the items in her purse that Officer Reynolds had made her remove. Her hands were steady, but inside she was a swirl of emotions: anger at being profiled, satisfaction at standing up for herself, and deep disappointment that even as sheriff, she wasn't immune to this kind of treatment. You know, she said finally, breaking the uncomfortable silence, I became a cop because I believe in justice. I ran for sheriff because I wanted to make changes in how our community is policed. She looked directly at Officer Reynolds. This is exactly the kind of behavior that destroys trust between law enforcement and the communities we're supposed to serve. Officer Reynolds still wouldn't meet her gaze. You're blowing this out of proportion, he muttered. Am I? Amara asked. How would you feel if someone accused you of being a thief with no evidence? If they humiliated you in public based on nothing but their own prejudice? A young woman who had been recording the whole thing spoke up. My brother gets stopped by the police all the time just for walking down the street. It's not right. No, it's not, Amara agreed. And as long as I'm sheriff, I'm going to do everything in my power to change that reality. The store employee who had identified Amara approached hesitantly. Sheriff Johnson, I just wanted to say, I've seen this happen before. Not with police, but with some of our own security. People get followed around the store just because of how they look. He glanced nervously at his manager. I've tried to report it, but nothing ever changes. The manager looked genuinely shocked. Why wasn't I informed about this? Because nobody wants to rock the boat, Amara said quietly. Nobody wants to be the one to point out the uncomfortable truth, that we all carry biases, and unless we consciously work to overcome them, they affect how we treat people. She looked pointedly at Officer Reynolds. The first step is acknowledging the problem exists. Officer Reynolds shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Look, I was just responding to what I thought was suspicious behavior. And what exactly was suspicious about me looking at telescopes? Amara pressed. Before he could answer, a commotion at the entrance to the department caught everyone's attention. Lieutenant Wilson had arrived, and he was moving quickly toward the group, his face serious. Sheriff Johnson, he said, extending his hand respectfully. I got here as fast as I could. He turned to Officer Reynolds. Officer, what happened here? Officer Reynolds straightened up. Sir, I observed what I believed to be suspicious behavior and approached to investigate. There was a misunderstanding. He accused me of shoplifting without cause, Amara interrupted. When I asked what evidence he had, he threatened to take me to the station for obstruction. Lieutenant Wilson's expression darkened. Is that true, Officer Reynolds? Reynolds hesitated, aware of all the eyes on him. I may have misinterpreted the situation. The store confirms they never reported any shoplifting, Amara added, and there are numerous witnesses who saw the entire interaction. Not to mention all the video evidence, someone in the crowd called out, holding up their phone. Lieutenant Wilson nodded grimly. Officer Reynolds will continue this discussion back at the station. For now, you're relieved of duty for the remainder of the day. He turned to Amara. Sheriff, I cannot apologize enough for this incident. I assure you it will be thoroughly investigated. As Officer Reynolds was led away by his superior, the weight of what had just happened settled over the store. Amara stood tall, surrounded by strangers who had witnessed her humiliation and her dignity. The battle wasn't over. There would be reports to file, meetings to attend, perhaps even media coverage to manage. But in this moment, justice had prevailed. The store manager approached her again. "Sheriff Johnson, please let me know if there's anything we can do." Amara nodded slowly, her mind already turning to the bigger picture, how to use this incident to drive real change. "Actually," she said, "I think there is." After Officer Reynolds left with Lieutenant Wilson, a strange mixture of tension and relief filled the air. The crowd of onlookers began to disperse, some patting Amara supportively on the shoulder as they walked away. Several people approached to express their sympathy or share similar experiences they'd had. Each story reinforced what Amara already knew. This wasn't an isolated incident. "Sheriff Johnson," the store manager said, nervously smoothing her blazer. "I'd still like to talk with you, if that's okay. Perhaps we could go to my office now?" Amara checked her watch. After all this, she still needed to buy her nephew's telescope. "Sure," she agreed. "But first, I'd like to finish what I came here to do." The manager blinked in surprise. "Of course, please let me help you. The telescope you were looking at, it's one of our best models." "Thank you," Amara said, walking back to the display where this whole ordeal had begun. "My nephew is turning 11 this weekend. He loves space." "I have a nephew about that age too," the manager said, clearly eager to move past the uncomfortable incident. "They're so curious at that age, aren't they?" Amara nodded, examining the telescope she'd been looking at before Officer Reynolds interrupted her shopping trip. It was perfect. Not too complicated for a beginner, but good enough to see the rings of Saturn and the moons of Jupiter. The price tag was steep, but seeing her nephew's face light up would be worth every penny. "I'll take this one," she decided. The manager immediately waved over an employee.
"Thomas, please bring a new one from the stockroom."
"And it's on the house, of course," Amara shook her head firmly. "No, I appreciate the gesture, but I'll pay for it." She'd learned long ago not to accept special treatment, even when it was offered with good intentions. "I just want to be treated like any other customer." The manager looked slightly embarrassed but nodded in understanding. "Of course. I'll have Thomas bring it to the front register when you're ready." After selecting a few more items for her nephew, a space-themed bedding set, a NASA t-shirt, and a book about black holes, Amara headed to the checkout counter. The cashier recognized her immediately, word of the incident having spread throughout the store. "Sheriff Johnson," the young cashier said with a nervous smile. "It's an honor to meet you. I voted for you in the election." "Thank you," Amara replied warmly. She appreciated the recognition but didn't want to be treated differently. "Just these items today, please." As the cashier rang up her purchases, Amara noticed two police officers enter the store. She recognized both of them, Officer Chen and Officer Rodriguez from the city police department. They spotted her and headed in her direction. "Sheriff Johnson," Officer Chen said respectfully as they approached. "Lieutenant Wilson sent us to check on you and take your official statement if you're willing." Officer Rodriguez added, "We also wanted to personally apologize for our colleagues' behavior. It doesn't represent who we try to be as a department." Amara appreciated their sincerity. "Thank you both. I'll be happy to give a statement, but let me finish my shopping first." While she waited for the cashier to finish, Amara noticed something interesting. The two officers were getting curious looks from shoppers, but there was no fear or tension in those glances. These officers had built a reputation of respect in the community. They smiled at customers, chatted briefly with a child who wanted to see their badges, and generally put people at ease. It was exactly the kind of policing Amara believed in. Officers who were seen as part of the community, not apart from it or above it. The stark contrast with Officer Reynolds' behavior wasn't lost on her. After paying for her purchases, Amara joined the officers at a small seating area near the store entrance. Officer Chen took out a tablet to record her statement. "Whenever you're ready." "Sheriff," he said. Amara recounted the events clearly and factually, neither downplaying nor exaggerating what had happened. She described Officer Reynolds' approach, his accusations, his refusal to explain the basis for his suspicion, and his threatening manner when she questioned him. He said, and I quote, "I've seen people like you in here before," Amara said, her voice steady. The implication was clear. Officer Rodriguez shook his head in disgust. "That's completely unacceptable." "Were there any witnesses who might have recorded the interaction?" Officer Chen asked. At least a dozen people were recording, Amara confirmed. The store manager might be able to help you get in touch with them. Just as she finished giving her statement, Amara's phone rang. It was the chief of police, Officer Reynolds's highest superior. "Sheriff Johnson," he said when she answered, his voice grave. "I just heard what happened. I want you to know that I take this extremely seriously." "I appreciate that, Chief Brooks," Amara replied, stepping away from the officers for privacy. "I've already reviewed Officer Reynolds' body camera footage," Chief Brooks continued. "It confirms everything you reported. His behavior was completely unacceptable, and I want to assure you that appropriate action will be taken." Amara wasn't surprised that they'd checked the body camera so quickly. A confrontation between a city police officer and the county sheriff was no small matter. "I hope that action includes more than just disciplining one officer," Amara said. "This is a systemic issue." "I agree," Chief Brooks said, surprising her, "which is why I'd like to meet with you this week to discuss potential department-wide changes. Your perspective would be invaluable." "I'd be happy to meet," Amara agreed. This was an unexpected opening, a chance to implement some of the reforms she'd been advocating for since before she was elected sheriff. After ending the call, Amara returned to Officers Chen and Rodriguez, who were finishing up their report. "That was Chief Brooks," she told them. "He's reviewed the body camera footage already." Both officers looked relieved. Video evidence meant there would be no question about what had happened. No room for Officer Reynolds to twist the facts or minimize his actions. "The body camera doesn't lie," Officer Chen said. "And neither does store security footage. We've requested that as well." Amara nodded, gathering her shopping bags. "I should get going. I have a meeting at the county office in an hour." Officer Rodriguez stood. "We can escort you to your car, Sheriff." Amara almost declined automatically. She'd never been one to stand on ceremony or expect special treatment. But she realized that this wasn't about status. This was about solidarity. One law enforcement professional supporting another after an upsetting incident. "Thank you," she said. "I'd appreciate that." As they walked through the mall, Amara noticed something that made her smile despite the stress of the day. People weren't staring at her with pity. Instead, they looked at her with respect, even admiration. Word had spread quickly about how she'd handled the situation with dignity and strength. An elderly woman stopped her near the exit. "Sheriff," she said, her eyes bright with emotion, "I just wanted to say how proud we are to have you representing our county." "Thank you," Amara replied, touched by the woman's sincerity. "My grandson is in high school," the woman continued. "He wants to be a police officer someday. I'm going to tell him about what I saw today, how you stood up for yourself with such grace. That's the kind of officer I want him to be." Amara felt a lump form in her throat. This was why she'd gone into law enforcement in the first place, to make a difference, to be the kind of role model she wished she'd had growing up. "Tell your grandson I'd be happy to meet him sometime," Amara said. The future of law enforcement depends on young people who understand the true meaning of protect and serve. As she continued toward the parking lot with her escort, Amara's phone buzzed with text messages and notifications. News of the incident was spreading beyond the mall now. Her assistant had texted that several local news outlets were requesting statements, and the county commissioner wanted to speak with her immediately. Amara sighed, knowing her quiet shopping day had turned into something much bigger, but perhaps that was for the best. Real change rarely came from comfort and convenience. It came from confronting painful truths and difficult situations. When they reached her car, Officers Chen and Rodriguez helped load her packages into the trunk. "Sheriff," Officer Chen said before leaving, "just so you know, most of us in the department really respect the changes you've been making at the county level. What happened today was wrong, but maybe some good will come from it." "I hope so," Amara replied. "Because what happened to me today happens to people without badges every day, and they don't always get justice." As she drove away from the mall, Amara reflected on how quickly everything had changed. She'd gone from being treated like a criminal to having the police chief himself called to apologize in the span of less than an hour. Her badge had protected her, but it shouldn't take a badge to be treated with dignity and respect. That reality fueled her determination to use this incident as a catalyst for meaningful change, not just for herself, but for everyone in her community. The road ahead would be challenging. She knew there would be resistance, defensiveness, and attempts to dismiss what had happened as an isolated incident, rather than a symptom of a deeper problem. But Amara Johnson hadn't become the first black female sheriff in county history by backing down from challenges. She made a mental note to call her nephew before his birthday. She wanted to remind him that the telescope she'd bought wasn't just for looking at stars. It was for broadening horizons and seeing things that might otherwise remain invisible. Sometimes the most important discoveries came from looking at familiar things in a new light. And that was exactly what she intended to do with her county's approach to policing. By the time Amara pulled into the parking lot of the county sheriff's department, her phone had nearly vibrated itself off the passenger seat. 37 missed calls, dozens of text messages, and more email notifications than she could count. Word had spread like wildfire. She took a moment to breathe before getting out of the car. The day had taken an unexpected turn, and she needed to center herself before facing what came next. Through the windshield, she could see several news vans already parked near the entrance. A small crowd of reporters stood chatting, cameras at the ready. So much for a quiet shopping trip, Amara muttered to herself. Her deputy, Thomas Rivera, was waiting just inside the door. He'd been her right-hand man since she took office, and the concern on his face was genuine. "Are you okay?" he asked immediately. "I heard what happened at the mall." "I'm fine," Amara assured him, though the tension in her shoulders suggested otherwise. "But we have some work to do." They walked together through the building. Staff members stopped what they were doing to watch her pass, some offering words of support, others simply nodding respectfully. Amara appreciated their solidarity but felt uncomfortable being the center of attention. In her office, the messages waiting for her told the same story. Video of the incident had gone viral. Clips were circulating on every social media platform, showing Officer Reynolds confronting her, demanding to see her bag, and then his obvious shock when she revealed her badge. "The commissioner called 3 times, Thomas said, handing her a stack of message slips. The mayor too, and pretty much every news outlet in the state." "What about Officer Reynolds?" Amara asked, settling behind her desk. Thomas's expression hardened. "Last I heard, he's on administrative leave pending investigation. The police chief isn't messing around with this one." Amara nodded, unsurprised. "And Lieutenant Wilson?" "He wants to meet with you as soon as possible. Says he has something important to discuss." Before Amara could respond, her phone rang again. The caller ID showed it was Chief Brooks, the head of the city police department where Officer Reynolds worked. She answered on speaker so Thomas could hear. "Sheriff Johnson," the chief's voice came through clearly. "Thank you for taking my call. I know you must be overwhelmed right now." "It's been quite a day," Amara acknowledged. "What's the status on your end?" "I've personally reviewed all available footage," Chief Brooks said. "The body cam, store security video, and at least a dozen recordings from witnesses. There's no ambiguity about what happened." He paused, and Amara could hear papers shuffling. "Officer Reynolds has been placed on immediate administrative leave. His badge and gun have been surrendered pending a full investigation. I've also called an emergency meeting with the police union representative to discuss next steps." Amara raised an eyebrow at Thomas. The chief was moving with unusual speed and decisiveness. "I appreciate your prompt action," she said carefully. "To be completely transparent, Sheriff," the chief continued, "we're facing a potential public relations nightmare. But more importantly, what happened to you was wrong on every level. It violated departmental policy, professional ethics, and basic human decency." "I agree," Amara said, "but I'm more concerned with the systemic issues than with one officer's behavior." "As am I," Chief Brooks surprised her again. "Which is why I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss department-wide reforms. This incident has made it clear that our current training and oversight measures are inadequate." After finishing the call and scheduling the meeting, Amara turned to Thomas. "Well, that was unexpected," she said. "I've been trying to get a meeting about reform initiatives for months." Thomas leaned against the doorframe. "Nothing motivates change like public embarrassment. Have you seen the videos? They're brutal." Amara hadn't watched them yet. Part of her didn't want to relive the experience, but she knew she needed to see what everyone else was seeing. "Show me," she said. Thomas pulled up one of the most widely shared videos on his tablet and handed it to her. The footage was clear and damning. From this angle, she could see what she hadn't noticed in the moment. Officer Reynolds walking past several white shoppers to approach her specifically, his hand resting near his weapon the entire time, his dismissive body language. The video had millions of views already, with thousands of comments expressing outrage. "People are angry," Thomas said as she handed the tablet back. "And not just about what happened to you specifically. This has touched a nerve." Amara nodded slowly. "Because people recognize the pattern. They've experienced it themselves or witnessed it happening to others." Before they could discuss further, there was a knock at the door. Lieutenant Wilson stood there looking somber. "Sheriff Johnson," he said formally. "Thank you for seeing me. I know this isn't a good time." "Come in, Lieutenant." Amara gestured to the chair across from her desk. Thomas excused himself, closing the door behind him. Lieutenant Wilson sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. He placed a folder on the desk between them. "I want to personally apologize again for Officer Reynolds' behavior," he began. "There's no excuse for how you were treated. I appreciate that," Amara said. "But I'm more interested in what happens next." The lieutenant nodded, opening the folder. "I've brought Officer Reynolds' complete service record. I thought you should see it." Amara leaned forward, scanning the documents. Reynolds had been on the force for 8 years. His record showed several commendations for bravery, but also something more concerning. Multiple civilian complaints alleging unfair treatment and excessive force, particularly against people of color. Each complaint had been investigated and dismissed due to insufficient evidence. "This is a pattern," Amara said, looking up from the file. "Yes," Lieutenant Wilson admitted. "We've had concerns about Officer Reynolds' approach to community policing for some time, but without concrete evidence, our hands were tied." "The department's disciplinary protocols require—" "I'm familiar with the protocols," Amara interrupted. "But let's be honest here. The system is designed to protect officers, not to hold them accountable." Lieutenant Wilson didn't argue. "That's why I brought this to you directly. With your position as county sheriff and what happened today, you have leverage that others don't." Amara understood what he was saying. As an elected official with public support and video evidence, she had the power to push for changes that previous complainants couldn't achieve. "What exactly are you suggesting, Lieutenant?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice despite them being alone. "I've been trying to implement better training and accountability measures for years. So have others in the department. But there's always resistance, always budget constraints, always excuses." He tapped the folder containing Reynolds' record. "This incident could be the catalyst we need, not just to discipline one officer, but to overhaul the entire approach." Amara studied him carefully. "You're putting your neck on the line coming to me like this." "Someone has to," he said simply. "What happened to you today happens to people in our community every day. The difference is you have the power to do something about it." As if on cue, Amara's phone buzzed with a message from the county commissioner, requesting an emergency meeting to discuss the incident. "Looks like I'll have that chance sooner rather than later," she said, showing him the message. "The commissioner wants to meet right away." Lieutenant Wilson stood to leave. "I should let you prepare. But Sheriff, one more thing. Officer Reynolds has a lot of supporters in the department. Not everyone will be happy about this becoming public." "I'm not concerned with making everyone happy," Amara replied. "I'm concerned with doing what's right." After the lieutenant left, Thomas returned with a fresh cup of coffee and news that the commissioner was already waiting in the conference room. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as they walked down the hallway. Amara straightened her jacket. "I've been ready since the day I took office." The conference room was crowded with county officials, including the commissioner, the county attorney, and several members of the oversight board. Their faces showed varying degrees of concern, embarrassment, and calculation. "Sheriff Johnson," Commissioner Alvarez began as Amara took her seat. "We've called this emergency session to address today's unfortunate incident. The video has gone viral, and we need to craft a unified response." "What happened today wasn't just unfortunate," Amara replied firmly. "It was unjust and illegal, and it's not an isolated incident." The commissioner looked uncomfortable. Of course, what Officer Reynolds did was completely inappropriate. We all agree on that. But we need to be careful about making broader accusations. "I'm not making accusations," Amara interrupted. "I'm stating facts backed by data." She opened her laptop and pulled up the statistical analysis her department had been working on for months. "These numbers show clear disparities in how different communities are policed." The county attorney leaned forward. "Sheriff, while we sympathize with your personal experience today, This meeting is about crafting a public statement, not debating policy. Then let me be clear about what I will and won't say publicly, Amara stated, her voice calm but resolute. I won't downplay what happened. I won't call it an isolated incident. And I won't settle for empty promises of reviewing policies. She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. What I will do is use this moment to push for real, measurable changes in how we train officers, how we handle complaints, and how we hold people accountable. A tense silence fell over the room. The commissioner and the county attorney exchanged glances. What exactly are you proposing? Commissioner Alvarez asked finally. Amara was prepared for this question. She'd been developing reform proposals since before she was elected. Mandatory bias training for all law enforcement in the county, an independent civilian oversight board with actual authority, body cameras for every officer, with clear consequences for turning them off, and a complete overhaul of the complaint investigation process. The county attorney shook his head. That's a tall order, Sheriff. The budget implications alone are far less than the cost of settling lawsuits, Amara finished for him, or the cost to our community when people don't trust the police. More uncomfortable glances around the table. And if we don't agree to these demands? The commissioner asked. Amara closed her laptop. Then I take my story and these statistics directly to the public. Today's video has already created momentum. People are paying attention in a way they haven't before. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. Amara had never wanted to be the face of police reform. She'd hoped to work within the system to change things gradually, but sometimes change needed a catalyst. After a long pause, Commissioner Alvarez nodded slowly. Draft a proposal. We'll review it and discuss implementation timelines. I already have one, Amara replied, pulling a folder from her bag. She'd prepared these documents months ago, waiting for the right moment. And implementation begins immediately. As the meeting continued into the evening, hammering out details and compromises, Amara felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. What had started as a simple shopping trip had turned into something much more significant. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister. Saw the video. Are you okay? Do I need to come down there? Amara smiled slightly at her sister's protective instinct. I'm fine, she texted back. Actually, I'm better than fine. I think we're finally going to see some real change. And for the first time that day, she truly believed it. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at the mall. Amara stood at the window of her office watching the morning sun cast long shadows across the county courthouse lawn. So much had changed in such a short time. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Have you seen the news? Turn on Channel 7. Amara grabbed the remote and switched on the small TV mounted in the corner of her office. She caught the tail end of a news report about Officer Reynolds. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, Officer involved in sheriff profiling incident reassigned to desk duty, required to complete extensive bias training. The news anchor was wrapping up the story. After a thorough investigation, the police department announced today that Officer Michael Reynolds will not return to patrol duties. Instead, he will be permanently reassigned to an administrative position and required to complete a comprehensive bias training program developed in partnership with community leaders. Amara sat down at her desk, taking a moment to process the news. It wasn't the harshest punishment possible, but it was significant. More importantly, it was public. The department hadn't swept the incident under the rug or dismissed it as a misunderstanding. They had acknowledged the problem and taken visible action. Her deputy, Thomas, appeared in the doorway with 2 coffee cups. You saw the news? Amara nodded, accepting the coffee he offered. I did. What do you think? Some people are saying he should have been fired. Amara took a sip before responding. Maybe. But sometimes keeping someone in the system and requiring them to change is more effective than pushing them out. At least this way he might learn something. Thomas didn't look convinced. If it had been anyone but you he'd profiled that day, do you think the outcome would be the same? It was a fair question. Amara knew that her position as sheriff had given her leverage that ordinary citizens didn't have. That reality had driven every decision she'd made in the past 3 weeks. No, she admitted. That's why the systemic changes are more important than what happens to one officer. Thomas gestured to the stack of papers on her desk. Speaking of which, how's the new oversight board coming along? Amara smiled for the first time that morning. Better than expected. The county commissioners approved the budget yesterday. We can start accepting applications for civilian members next week. The creation of an independent oversight board with real authority had been her top priority, a board with the power to review complaints, access body camera footage, and make binding recommendations. It wouldn't solve every problem, but it was a significant step toward accountability. And the training program? Thomas asked. That's actually why I need you today, Amara said, standing up and gathering her files. The Joint Committee is meeting at 10 to finalize the curriculum. I want you there to represent our department. The training program was another major victory, mandatory bias and de-escalation training for all law enforcement officers in the county, developed in collaboration with community advocates and experts. Unlike previous trainings that had been brief and superficial, this program would be comprehensive, ongoing, and evaluated for effectiveness. As they walked through the building toward the conference room, Amara noticed something different about her staff. There was a new energy, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. Many of them had joined law enforcement with idealistic goals of serving their communities, only to become discouraged by entrenched problems. Now they could see real change happening. Sheriff Johnson, a voice called from behind them. Amara turned to see Officer Rodriguez, one of the officers who had taken her statement at the mall. Do you have a moment? Thomas continued ahead while Amara stepped aside to speak with Rodriguez. What can I do for you, officer? She asked. Rodriguez looked nervous. I wanted to let you know that I've applied for a transfer to your department. The county sheriff's office is where the real changes are happening, and I want to be part of that. Amara was surprised but pleased. We'd be lucky to have you. But are you sure? There might be some pushback from your colleagues. There already has been, Rodriguez admitted. Some officers think I'm betraying the Brotherhood by supporting these reforms. But others, more than you might expect, feel the same way I do. They're just afraid to say it out loud. This was something Amara hadn't anticipated, that the incident might inspire officers who wanted change to speak up and take action. It was a reminder that the thin blue line wasn't as unified as it sometimes appeared. I'll look for your application, Amara promised. We need officers who understand why these changes matter. The morning passed quickly in meetings and calls. By lunchtime, Amara finally had a chance to catch up on emails. One in particular caught her attention, a message from the store manager at the mall where the incident had occurred. Sheriff Johnson, it read, I wanted to update you on the changes we've implemented since your experience in our store. We've completed a full review of our security practices and have partnered with a local organization to provide anti-bias training for all our employees. Additionally, we've established a new customer feedback system to track and address any concerns about discriminatory treatment. Your dignity and grace that day inspired us to do better. Thank you for turning a negative experience into positive change. Amara sat back, oddly moved by the message. When she'd first decided to run for sheriff, she'd hoped to make a difference in her community. But change had come so slowly, with every small victory followed by new obstacles. Now, suddenly, doors were opening that had previously been locked tight. Her assistant knocked on the door. Sheriff, your nephew is here to see you. Amara checked her watch. It was nearly 1 cawing. She'd almost forgotten that her nephew was stopping by during his lunch break from school. 11-year-old. Dion bounded into the office with the energy only a preteen could possess. He was wearing his NASA t-shirt, one of the gifts she'd bought him that fateful day at the mall. Aunt Amara, he exclaimed, giving her a quick hug before dropping into a chair. Did you see I got an A on my science project? I used the telescope you gave me to take pictures of the moon's craters. That's fantastic, Amara said, grateful for this moment of normality amid the whirlwind of the past few weeks. I knew you'd do something amazing with it. My teacher posted my project online and it got like 1,000 views, Dion continued excitedly. But not as many as your video. Amara raised an eyebrow. My video? Yeah, the one from the mall, Dion said, suddenly serious. Everyone at school saw it. Some of the kids asked me about it because they know you're my aunt. Amara hadn't considered how the incident might affect her family. What did you tell them? Dion shrugged. I told them my aunt is fixing things. That's what you do, right? You fix things that are broken. Out of the mouths of babes, Amara thought. She'd never explained her job quite that way, but it was as good a description as any. I try, she said simply. Is that why you're on TV all the time now? Dion asked. Mom says you're becoming famous, Amara laughed. Not famous, just busy. The media attention had been intense since the incident, with interview requests from national news outlets and invitations to speak at conferences. She'd accepted some, recognizing the platform they provided for her message, but turned down many others. This wasn't about her. It was about the work. After lunch with Dion, Amara had one more important meeting on her calendar. Chief Brooks from the city police department had requested a private discussion about implementing the new reforms. Their relationship had evolved from professional courtesy to genuine collaboration over the past weeks. The chief was waiting in the small conference room they often used for their meetings. He stood when she entered, extending his hand. Sheriff Johnson, he greeted her. Thank you for making time. I know your schedule is packed these days. Yours too, I imagine, Amara replied, noting the tired lines around his eyes. Change wasn't easy, especially for those in leadership positions trying to shift entrenched cultures. I wanted to discuss the community forum next week, Chief Brooks said as they sat down. My officers are nervous about facing the public, especially after everything that's happened. The community forum had been Amara's idea, a chance for citizens to speak directly to law enforcement leaders about their experiences and expectations. It wouldn't be an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one. They should be nervous, Amara said frankly, but remind them that listening is the first step toward building trust. We can't fix problems we refuse to acknowledge. The chief nodded reluctantly. I know you're right, but some of them feel like they're being blamed for things they didn't do. It's not about blame, Amara explained, leaning forward. It's about responsibility. None of us created these problems, but all of us have a responsibility to solve them. By the time evening came, Amara was exhausted but satisfied. The reforms she'd fought for were taking shape, not just on paper but in real, tangible changes to how law enforcement operated in her community. As she gathered her things to head home, Thomas appeared in her doorway one last time. Almost forgot, he said, handing her a small package. This came for you today. Amara opened it to find a handwritten letter and a small pin in the shape of a telescope. The letter was from a teenage girl who had witnessed the incident at the mall. Dear Sheriff Johnson, it read. I'm 16 years old and I want to be a police officer someday. After watching how you handled yourself that day at the mall, I know it's possible to be the kind of officer I've always imagined. One who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard. The telescope pin is to remind you that sometimes we need to look at things differently to see the truth. Thank you for being a light in the darkness. Amara carefully pinned it to her jacket lapel, a small but meaningful symbol of how one difficult moment had sparked a movement toward positive change. As she walked to her car in the fading light, she reflected on how differently things might have turned out. If Officer Reynolds had approached someone without her badge, without her platform, without her voice, would anyone have listened? Would anything have changed? That question would drive her forward in the days and months to come. Because while her personal experience had led to concrete reforms, the work was far from complete. Real change wouldn't come from one incident or one person. It would come from sustained effort, difficult conversations, and a commitment to justice that transcended any single moment. But for now, at least they were moving in the right direction, and that was something worth building on.